We all want the young people who get involved with NDCS to be happy, protected and enjoy themselves. It's important that NDCS staff, volunteers and local group committee members know about the NDCS Child Protection Policy and understand that keeping children and young people safe is our responsibility. Deaf and disabled children are particularly vulnerable, so it's essential that we all know what to look out for and what to do if we suspect a child is being abused.
Child abuse is when someone inflicts harm upon a child or fails to prevent harm being inflicted upon a child. In the UK there are four main categories of abuse: physical, sexual, emotional abuse and neglect. And in Scotland there's a slight variation where neglect is split into two individual categories: physical neglect and non-organic failure to thrive. We know that deaf children are twice as likely to be abused than other children generally. This is because deaf children are more vulnerable and also because of the challenges that they have around communication, and this quite often means that they're targeted by individuals who would seek to abuse children. We know that anyone can abuse a child. It could be a family member, it could be a friend of the family, someone who's caring for a child. We also know that children abuse each other.
Let's look at the categories of abuse in more detail. Physical abuse is the deliberate physical injury to a child or intentional or unintentional failure to prevent injury or suffering. This may include hitting, shaking, throwing, poisoning, burning or scalding, drowning, suffocating, smacking, and the inappropriate restraint or locking up of a child. Some of the signs and indicators that physical abuse has happened are fist, hand or finger marks, unexplained bruising, bald patches, cigarette burns, bite marks. You might be alerted by particular behaviours and responses such as withdrawn behaviour, fear of parents being contacted or of going home, aggressive behaviour or severe temper outburst, flinching when approached or touched, reluctance to get changed, for example for sports or games, refusal to discuss injuries, frozen gaze, watchful. Emotional abuse is the persistent ill treatment of a child causing a severe adverse effect on their behaviour and development. A child may be told that they're worthless or unloved, or be made to feel frightened or in danger. Emotional abuse may include expectations being imposed on the child which are inappropriate for their age or development. Some of the physical signs that you might notice are failure of the child to grow or develop, speech or sign disorders, or eating disorders. Behaviours which might indicate emotional abuse are passive low self-esteem or low self-confidence, poor social skills, depression, lower than average intellectual development, sudden inexplicable rage, lying and stealing, bedwetting, forming addictions, inappropriate and illegal activity. Neglect is the persistent failure to meet a child's physical, emotional or psychological needs likely to result in significant harm. It may involve a parent or carer failing to provide adequate food, shelter and clothing, failing to protect a child from physical harm or danger, failing to ensure access to appropriate medical care or treatment, and the lack of stimulation or supervision. It may also include non-organic failure to thrive, where children significantly fail to reach normal developmental milestones, from growth and weight to intellectual, social and motor skills, and where this is not linked to physical or genetic reasons. In Scotland, this is a separate category of abuse. The physical indicators of neglect include poor hygiene, being underweight or overweight, being inappropriately dressed, being dirty or unkempt, complaining of hunger. Neglect means the lack of parental response to social and emotional needs. In the case of deaf children, poor communication skills might indicate that parents have made little or no attempt to communicate with their child or teach them to communicate themselves. Children with complex needs are significantly more at risk of abuse, particularly sexual abuse. Sudden changes in a child's behaviour or instinctive feelings you have about the possibility of sexual abuse must be conveyed to your designated child protection person immediately. Sexual abuse involves forcing or enticing a child or young person to take part in sexual activities whether or not the child is aware of what is happening. The activities may involve physical contact, including penetrative or non-penetrative acts, and the touching of a child's private parts. They may also include non-contact activities, such as involving children in looking at pornographic material, including images taken by a child themselves. 90% of sexual abuse is perpetrated by someone the child knows and trusts. Physical signs might include genital or anal pain, itching, bruising or bleeding, stomach pains and headaches, discomfort when walking or sitting, extreme behaviours, for example weight loss or gain. And behaviours or emotional responses to look out for are unexplained aggressive or withdrawn behaviour, fear of someone or several people or certain places, sexually abusing another child, sibling or friend, showing that they have sexual knowledge beyond their age or developmental level, saying they have secrets they cannot tell or having a friend who has a problem, having nightmares or being afraid of the dark, being fearful of undressing, chronic depression, memory loss or an inability to concentrate, substance or drug abuse, eating disorders, self-harming, self-loathing, sexualized behaviour.
There are different ways that we can tell if a child is being abused. It may be that you're on an event and you win the child's trust and they decide that they can tell you, or it may be that you notice a change in a child's behaviour, or you might actually see physical signs of abuse. The most important thing to do if you do spot signs of abuse is to let your designated person know.
Disclosure is when you find out that a child is being abused, and this can happen in different ways. You may witness some abuse firsthand. A child may tell you, or you might overhear them talking to somebody else, suggesting abuse has taken place. You might notice physical signs or a difference in behaviour, or it may be something about the child that concerns you. If you think that something might be wrong, don't try and deal with it yourself. Discuss it with a designated child protection person in your organisation, or whoever is running your event, the volunteer manager, your line manager, or the chair of your local group. If a child does disclose abuse to you, the things to remember are: stay calm, listen carefully, reassure the child, let the child lead the conversation. Be honest and explain that you will need to tell your designated child protection person who can help. Write detailed notes of the disclosure. If possible, use the Child Protection Incident Report form. Ensure you record dates and times. Where possible, tell your designated person, unless the allegation is against them. It's important to seek support after any incident. And remember, don't panic. Don't make a promise to keep it a secret. Don't confront the abuser. Avoid asking the child to repeat unnecessarily. Don't ask unwarranted or leading questions. If your designated child protection person is unavailable, or the allegation is about that person, or you need to contact a professional outside NDCS, you can contact the 24-hour NSPCC Child Protection Helpline. In an emergency where you believe a child is in imminent danger, contact the police and state that the call is in relation to child protection. It's important to be aware that children can abuse other children, and you must make sure that child protection procedures are followed in respect of both the victim and the alleged abuser. Child-on-child abuse may include bullying, children hurting each other physically or emotionally, name-calling or being racist. Each child's needs will be different, and an assessment should be carried out in each case. It's important not to dismiss abusive sexual behaviour as normal between young people, and all NDCS staff and volunteers must make sure that action is taken and recorded.
The NDCS sees the safeguarding of children as of paramount importance. We ensure that all of the checks are undertaken on our staff, volunteers and those who may come into contact with deaf children. We've developed good policies and procedures. We're also providing training to our staff, volunteers and to our local groups.
Some of the checks that we undertake include providing details of 2 referees, completing an enhanced CRB, Criminal Records Bureau check if based in England or Wales, a CRBS check with Disclosure Scotland if you live in Scotland, and an Excess NI check if you're a resident in Northern Ireland. The NDCS commitment to safeguarding children continues beyond the initial checking process, and we make sure that these checks are up to date and that training and resources are available to staff, volunteers and local groups.
It can feel like a huge responsibility if a child does decide to disclose abuse to you. The most important thing to remember is not to deal with it alone. There's plenty of support available and you must ask for help. When we're working or volunteering with children, it's important that we take our responsibilities seriously and set a good example of behaviour. Always remember to act in the best interests of the child.
Using the following guidelines, you can be confident that you're acting in the right way. If a child discloses abuse to you, you must record it and take appropriate action immediately. Meetings with individual children or young people should take place as openly as possible. Remember, it's important to respect the rights and needs of the child. Don't spend time alone with children away from others without good reason. Doors shouldn't be locked. Don't allow abusive peer activities such as bullying, ridiculing and racist comments. Don't engage in rough physical games, inappropriate touching, or make sexually suggestive comments even in fun. Physical punishments are not acceptable in any circumstances. If you see or hear anything that another adult does or says to a child that causes you concern, try and address this, ideally in an open way with the individual directly. If this is difficult or they take no notice, contact your designated person and ensure the child is safe. Make sure there's sufficient monitoring of children on an activity or in a creche. Make sure that all information about children is stored safely and returned to the project leader at the end of the event or activity. Don't take photos of children with cameras or mobile phones. If a distressed child needs physical contact for reassurance or comfort, this should only take place if appropriate and in the best interests of the child. Very young or children with complex needs may need more physical touch than others. Only carry out personal care tasks if the child is unable to do it themselves and if you've been asked to do so by NDCS and are comfortable with this. If you need to provide this kind of help in an emergency, record it and be sure to tell the parents. Restrictive physical intervention should only be used in situations where it's necessary to prevent injury or damage to a child. All incidents must be recorded and passed on to the event leader. I hope that you found this information useful and that you feel more confident in spotting the signs of abuse, about using appropriate behaviour when supervising children, and knowing what to do if you suspect abuse or a child discloses to you. Remember, you can find full copies of the NDCS Child Protection Policy and the Guidance for Safer Working Practice on the NDCS website. We're all involved with the NDCS because we're dedicated to breaking down the barriers for deaf children and making sure they're properly safeguarded. By following the guidelines in this DVD, the NDCS Child Protection Policy and the Guidance for Safer Working Practice document, we're creating an environment for children to feel safe, develop, and have fun.